Every single day you go to work, something is stealing from you. Not a thief in the night, not a tax collector with a badge, something invisible, something that takes a little bit every hour of every day, so slowly you barely notice until you look up one day and realize your savings can't buy what they used to. Your parents bought a house on a single income. You can barely afford rent on two. They retired with a pension and dignity. You're told to work until 70 and pray the stock market cooperates. This isn't bad luck. This isn't the economy. This is the direct mathematical consequence of a single decision made on a Sunday night in August 1971. A decision that rewired the entire concept of money. A decision that turned saving into a losing game. And here's what should terrify you. That decision wasn't a one-time event. It created a machine. And that machine is still running. It ran while you slept last night. It's running right now as you watch this. And unless you understand how it works, it will run until there's nothing left in your account worth stealing. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon interrupted the Sunday night television lineup to make an announcement. He told the American people that he was temporarily suspending the convertibility of the dollar into gold. Temporarily. That was the word he used 17 times in that 18-minute speech. He blamed speculators. He blamed foreign governments. He promised this was a defensive measure to protect American jobs and American prosperity. The suspension has now lasted 54 years. There is nothing more permanent in government than a temporary emergency measure. But the real crime wasn't the lie about temporary. The real crime was what that decision did to the fundamental nature of your money. Before that night, the dollar was a claim on something real. After that night, it became a promise backed by nothing but the good intentions of politicians. And if you've been paying attention to politicians lately, you know exactly what those intentions are worth. To understand why this matters to your savings account right now in 2026, you need to understand what money was before Nixon's announcement. Under the Bretton Woods system established in 1944, the U.S. dollar was backed by gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. Foreign governments could exchange their dollars for physical gold from the U.S. Treasury at that rate. This wasn't just an accounting arrangement. It was a leash. It meant the government couldn't print unlimited dollars because eventually someone would show up demanding gold that didn't exist. The system forced discipline. You couldn't fight an endless war in Vietnam and build a massive welfare state and bail out politically connected banks all at the same time. The math wouldn't allow it. The gold would run out. And by 1971, it was running out. Foreign governments led by France were lining up to exchange their paper dollars for American gold. They could see the U.S. was printing far more dollars than it had gold to back. They wanted out before the music stopped. Nixon had a choice. He could admit the U.S. had been living beyond its means. He could cut spending, raise taxes, and endure the political consequences of honesty. Or he could simply change the rules of the game. He chose to change the rules. By closing the gold window, he freed the Federal Reserve to print unlimited dollars without any physical constraint. The leash was cut. The dog was loose. And it has been running wild ever since. Now, here's where this gets personal. Here's where this stops being a history lesson and starts being the reason you feel like you're falling behind no matter how hard you work. The moment the dollar was untethered from gold, it began a slow, relentless decline in purchasing power. Not a dramatic collapse, a gradual erosion, like water wearing away stone. In 1971, a dollar bought a dollar's worth of goods. Today, that same dollar buys about 7 cents worth. 93% of your dollar's purchasing power has evaporated since Nixon's Sunday night speech. That's not inflation as a temporary inconvenience. That's inflation as a permanent wealth transfer mechanism. Let me make this concrete with numbers that should make you angry. If your grandfather put $10,000 in a savings account in 1971 and left it there, earning the average savings rate over 54 years, he would have roughly $28,000 today in nominal terms. Sounds like a gain, right? Wrong. Adjusted for inflation, that $28,000 buys less than what $10,000 bought in 1971. He earned interest every year. He did everything the financial advisors told him to do, and he lost purchasing power anyway. The interest didn't keep up with the inflation. It was never designed to. That's the trap. If you're starting to understand why your savings account feels like a leaky bucket, no matter how much you pour in, hit that like button right now. This isn't about algorithms or engagement metrics. It's about breaking through 50 years of financial propaganda that convinced your parents and grandparents that saving money in a bank was safe. It wasn't safe. It was surrender. The system was designed to take from savers and give to borrowers. And the biggest borrower of all is the United States government. Every pushes this in front of someone who still thinks they can save their way to security in a system built to punish savers. Let me show you the mechanism. It's elegant in its cruelty. The Federal Reserve has what economists politely call a 2% inflation target. They say this like it's responsible policy, like it's moderate, like it's careful stewardship of your purchasing power. But run the math on 2% per year. At 2% annual inflation, your money loses half its value every 36 years. That's not a bug in the system, that's the feature. The government wants your money to be worth less tomorrow than it is today. Why? Because the government is the largest debtor in human history. They owe over $36 trillion, and the easiest way to pay back debt is to pay it back with dollars that are worth less than the dollars you borrowed. Imagine you lent your neighbor $1,000 in 1971. He promises to pay you back over 50 years. Every year, he hands you a small payment. By 2025, he's paid you back the full $1,000 plus interest. You should be happy, right? Except those dollars he paid back in 2025 only buy what $70 bought in 1971. You got your money back, nominally. You lost your wealth, actually. That's the game. That's what the 1971 decision enabled. And you are the neighbor who lent the money. When you put money in a savings account, you're lending it to a bank. When you buy government bonds, you're lending to the Treasury. When you hold cash in your wallet, you're lending to the entire system. And in every case, you're being paid back in dollars that are deliberately engineered to be worth less than the dollars you put in. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is stated policy. The Federal Reserve publishes its inflation target publicly. They tell you they're going to devalue your savings by 2% per year minimum. They just use language designed to make it sound responsible instead of predatory. But here's where it gets worse. 2% is the target. The reality since 1971 has averaged closer to 4%. And in recent years, real inflation, the kind you feel at the grocery store and the gas pump and the rent office, has run far higher than the official numbers suggest. The government measures inflation using a formula that has been quietly revised over decades to produce lower numbers. They use something called hedonic adjustments. If your car costs more but has better features, they adjust the price down because you're getting more value. Your bank account doesn't care about hedonic adjustments. It cares about how many dollars you need to buy a gallon of milk. And that number keeps going up faster than your savings can grow. The compounding effect over 54 years is staggering. Let's walk through the math that should be taught in every high school economics class, but mysteriously isn't. If you saved $100 per month starting in 1971 and earned the average savings account interest rate, you would have contributed $64,800 over 54 years. With compound interest, your account would show roughly $140,000. That sounds like a victory. Your money more than doubled. But here's the gut punch. Adjusted for inflation, that $140,000 has the purchasing power of about $12,1971. You saved for 54 years. You did everything right. And you ended up with less buying power than you would have had if you'd just spent the money in the first year and bought something real. The system punished you for your discipline. Compare that to someone who bought gold in 1971 at $35 per ounce. Your $64,800 in contributions could have purchased almost 2,000 ounces. Today, gold trades above $2,300 per ounce. That same investment would be worth over $4 million. Not because gold is magic, because gold can't be printed. The Federal Reserve can't hold a meeting and decide to create more gold. They can only create more dollars. And they've been creating them at an accelerating pace ever since Nixon gave them permission. The 1971 decision didn't just change the rules once. It created a system that requires constant dollar creation to function. The government runs deficits every year. The deficits must be financed by selling bonds. If there aren't enough buyers for the bonds, the Federal Reserve steps in and buys them with newly created dollars. This is called monetizing the debt. It's the polite term for printing money to cover spending the government can't afford. And every new dollar dilutes the dollars already in existence. Your dollars, the ones you worked for, the ones you saved, the ones you thought were safe. This is why the 1971 decision is still destroying your savings today. It created a monetary system with a built-in wealth transfer from people who save to people who spend, from workers who earn dollars to institutions that create them, from the middle class to the asset-owning elite. Every year the machine runs, the transfer continues. Every dollar printed makes your dollars worth less. And the machine cannot stop. If the Federal Reserve stopped printing, if the government stopped borrowing, if the deficits closed tomorrow, the entire financial system would collapse. The system now depends on the inflation to function. Your impoverishment is a feature, not a bug. The acceleration in recent years should alarm anyone paying attention. From 1971 to 2020, roughly 50 years, the total amount of dollars in existence grew from about 600 billion to about 4 trillion. That's a massive expansion, but it happened gradually. Then came 2020. In a single year, the money supply nearly doubled. The Federal Reserve created more dollars in 12 months than had been created in the previous century combined. They called it emergency stimulus. They said it was necessary to prevent economic collapse, but the dollars they created didn't disappear when the emergency ended. They're still out there. They're still diluting your savings. They're still pushing prices higher. And the precedent has been set. The next crisis will trigger the same response. More printing, more dilution, more wealth transfer. If you've made it this far, you understand something most people never grasp. The game is rigged, and it's been rigged since a Sunday night in 1971. But understanding the game is the first step to refusing to play by their rules. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications because we're going to keep exposing the mechanisms they use to separate you from your wealth. The next video reveals exactly how they plan to digitize this theft with central bank digital currencies that will make opting out nearly impossible. You need to see what's coming before it arrives. So what do you do with this knowledge? How do you protect yourself from a decision made before most of you were born? The first step is brutal honesty. A savings account is not saving, it's slow motion losing. When the interest rate on your savings is lower than the real rate of inflation, you're paying the bank for the privilege of watching your purchasing power evaporate. The financial industry spent 50 years convincing Americans that savings accounts were safe and responsible. They were safe for the bank. They were responsible for the system. They were catastrophic for you. The second step is understanding what the 1971 decision revealed. Money backed by nothing can be created in unlimited quantities. Money backed by something scarce cannot. The protection against a system designed to devalue currency is to own things that cannot be printed. Gold has served this function for 5,000 years of human history. Real estate produces income and cannot be conjured from a keyboard. Productive businesses generate real value that rises with inflation. Bitcoin was designed specifically as money with a fixed supply that no government can expand. 21 million coins, ever. No emergency Fed meeting can change that number. The third step is recognizing where you stand in the wealth transfer. The 1971 decision created winners and losers. The winners are those who get access to newly created money first. Banks, government contractors, asset managers, the politically connected. They buy assets before prices rise. The losers are those who get the money last if they get it at all. Workers whose wages lag inflation. Savers whose interest payments trail price increases. Retirees on fixed incomes watching their purchasing power shrink year after year. This is called the Cantillon effect, named after an economist who described it 300 years ago. First receivers win. Last receivers lose. You are almost certainly a last receiver. The fourth step is the hardest. You must abandon the financial advice that was designed for a different era. Your grandparents were told to save cash, buy bonds, and trust the system. That advice made sense when the dollar was backed by gold. It's financial suicide when the dollar is backed by promises from politicians who benefit from breaking those promises. The rules changed in 1971. The conventional wisdom never updated. The 1971 decision wasn't just a historical event. It was the installation of a machine that runs constantly, silently, automatically, transferring wealth from those who save to those who print. That machine ran while you slept last night. It ran while you worked today. It's running right now as you watch these words, and it will continue running until either the system collapses under its own weight or you remove yourself from its gears. The savers of 1971 were told the suspension was temporary. They believed it. They kept their dollars in banks and bonds. They watched their purchasing power evaporate over 54 years while being told everything was fine. The system was working. The experts had it under control. The experts have it under control. They have it under their control, not yours. Richard Nixon stood in front of cameras and promised a temporary measure. Every Fed chairman since has promised responsible management of the currency. Every politician has promised fiscal restraint. Those promises were paid in dollars that were worth less every year. The pattern hasn't changed because the incentives haven't changed. The people who benefit from printing money are the people who decide whether to print money. Your savings account earning 4% while real inflation runs 8% isn't an investment strategy. It's a donation to the banks. Every dollar you hold in cash is a slowly melting ice cube. Every year you wait to understand this system is another year of wealth quietly transferred away from your family and toward the institutions that designed this game. The 1971 decision broke the link between money and reality. It turned currency into a tool of wealth extraction rather than wealth storage. And unless you see the mechanism clearly, you will keep feeding the machine that's eating your future. Your great-grandparents understood money as something you earned, saved, and passed on. They could put gold coins in a safe and know their grandchildren would inherit real wealth. The 1971 decision ended that world. It replaced it with a world where saving is punished, debt is rewarded, and the purchasing power of your labor evaporates before the direct deposit clears. Every time you wonder why life feels harder than it should, why your paycheck doesn't stretch as far as it used to, why your parents could afford things that seem impossible now, you're feeling the 1971 decision. It's not in the history books as a wealth transfer. It's in the history books as monetary policy. But policy is just a polite word for choices that benefit some people at the expense of others. And for 54 years, the expense has been yours. There's one more piece of this puzzle that ties everything together. The 1971 decision didn't just enable unlimited money printing, it enabled unlimited borrowing. Before Nixon closed the gold window, there was a natural limit to how much the government could borrow. If they borrowed too much, foreign governments would demand gold and the vaults would empty. After 1971, that limit disappeared. The national debt in 1971 was $400 billion. Today, it exceeds $36 trillion. That's a 90-fold increase in 54 years. And here's the mathematical reality that should keep you up at night. That debt can never be paid back through taxation. The numbers are too large. The only way to manage it is to inflate it away. To pay back $36 trillion in borrowed dollars with dollars that are worth a fraction of what they were when borrowed. You are the lender. Through your pension fund, through your bank deposits, through your bond holdings, through simply holding the currency. You lent the government your purchasing power. They are paying you back in purchasing power that has been deliberately diluted. This isn't a side effect. This is the strategy. It's called financial repression, and it's been official policy for decades. Keep interest rates below the rate of inflation, and the debt gradually melts away. The debt melts, your savings melt. The math is the same. The people who understood this in 1971 converted their dollars into hard assets. Land, gold, productive businesses. They watched those assets multiply in dollar terms while their neighbors watched savings accounts barely keep pace with official inflation and fall far behind real inflation. The wealth gap you hear about on the news, the one where the rich keep getting richer while everyone else treads water, that gap is not an accident of capitalism. It's a direct consequence of the 1971 decision. Those who own assets that can't be printed get richer as more dollars chase the same goods. Those who hold cash and bonds get poorer as their dollars buy less every year. This is why the average American feels squeezed even when the stock market hits record highs. The stock market is denominated in dollars. When you print more dollars, stock prices rise. That's not real wealth creation. That's measurement in a shrinking unit. It's like claiming you grew taller because you switched to a shorter ruler. The asset owners look wealthier on paper. The wage earners can't afford what they could afford last year. Both outcomes trace back to August 15, 1971. The 1971 decision also fundamentally changed the incentives around work and saving. In a sound money system, you could work hard, save your earnings, and know that your savings would buy at least as much in the future as they buy today. Maybe more if productivity improvements made goods cheaper. The discipline of saving was rewarded. The system encouraged patience, delayed gratification, and long-term thinking. After 1971, the incentives flipped. Now, patience is punished. The longer you wait to spend your dollars, the less they buy. The system encourages consumption, debt, and short-term thinking. Why save for tomorrow when tomorrow's dollars will be worth less than today's? Why delay purchases when prices only go up? This psychological shift didn't happen by accident. It was engineered. A population that consumes constantly and saves nothing is a population dependent on the system. A population that saves and delays is a population with options. The 1971 decision took away your options by making saving a losing game. Consider the generational impact. Young Americans today will work their entire careers under a system designed to transfer their wealth away from them. Every paycheck they receive will be worth slightly less by the time they spend it. Every dollar they save will buy slightly less by the time they need it. They've been told to trust the system, invest in index funds, and let compound interest work its magic. But compound interest loses to compound inflation every time. The magic trick is that they never show you both numbers side by side. The 1971 decision created a world where the only winning move is to opt out of dollars as a store of value, not as a medium of exchange. You still need dollars to buy groceries and pay rent. But as a store of value, as a way to preserve purchasing power across time, dollars are a guaranteed loss. The Federal Reserve guarantees it with their 2% inflation target. They promise to make your money worth less. They just promise to do it slowly enough that you don't revolt. The machine Nixon built is still running. It ran through the stagflation of the 70s when Americans first felt the consequences of unlimited money creation. It ran through the Volcker shock of the 80s, when interest rates hit 20% and a generation learned that the Fed could crash the economy anytime it chose. It ran through the asset bubbles of the 90s and 2000s, when printed money flowed into stocks and real estate and created the illusion of wealth that evaporated overnight. It ran through 2008, when the banks that created the crisis were bailed out with printed money while homeowners were foreclosed. It ran through 2020 when more money was created in a single year than in entire decades before. And it's running right now as you read these words, as the national debt climbs, as the money supply expands, as your savings lose purchasing power hour by hour. Now you know it exists. You know when it started. You know why it started. You know how it works. You know who benefits and who pays. What you do next determines whether you keep feeding it or start building something it can't touch. The savers who understood 1971 protected their families. The savers who didn't lost silently over decades. The same choice is in front of you now. The 1971 decision that's still destroying your savings. Today wasn't an accident, it was architecture. Every year since has been construction, building the machine higher, making the transfers larger, embedding the theft deeper into the system. And the only escape is to stop storing your wealth in the building they designed. The gold window closed 54 years ago. Your window to understand what that means and act on it is still open. But the people who built this system are working on that problem, too. Central bank digital currencies, the elimination of cash, the closing of every exit from the dollar system. They're coming. And when they arrive, the option to opt out may close forever. The 1971 decision was the moment they removed the constraint on their power. The coming decisions will be the moment they remove the constraint on your ability to escape. Act while you still can. The machine is patient. It doesn't need you to understand. It just needs you to keep depositing your paychecks and trusting the system. Now you understand. The question is what you're going to do about it.